Church. It's good to see you today. Again, if you're a guest or visitor, my name is Luke. I'm one of the pastors, and I'm grateful for our other pastors that were here. Grateful Pastor Jeff, Pastor Brent, Pastor Matt is out. They had a baby last night. I'm not sure if that's public information yet. I'm on our broadcast. I think I just made a mistake. So don't text them, whatever else. So anyway, shoot, I hate technology. So this is totally backfiring today. Hey, if you have a Bible, go to 1 Samuel chapter 5. We are in this book of the Bible in which we will kind of like journey through for about 16 weeks. So we're going the distance with this narrative. And so we're kind of doing hard things because it's easy to do the simple things where we go through a small book or a short book. We'll stick in a book of the Bible for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. Sometimes it's an easy thing to do a 3-week or 4-week topical sermon series. But hey, we're just going to endure for 16 weeks, push through, because we know that the scriptures are fully sufficient to accomplish the will of God in our lives. And so we're just going to exist in them. And we're just going to let ourselves kind of be soaked in these words, 1 Samuel and the chapters therein. So again, I think it's important also to note a couple of things. In preparations for a sermon, I visit a lot of sources. And so I would like to consider myself kind of like a honeybee. And, before I create the honey, I will collect pollen from many a flower. So again, I will go to blogs and I will read books and commentaries and listen to messages. I will get through a dozen or more podcasts. It's just how I work. Collect a lot of different information and then kind of boil it down and begin then to make the message. And so, but I want you to know that it's important that I recognize the influences that are poured into me and acknowledge them before you, because it's growing increasingly prevalent in the culture for people to hear somebody's words and then repackage them as their own. Really, it's all theft, it's plagiarism, and it's going so very common. It's prevalent in this digital era because it's also easy. It's easy to Google around for a little bit, take in some content, and then just repackage it like it's your own. And I make my own honey. I make my own messages. But I want you to know that I am a man that has the DNA of other men kind of running through me as I've prepared for this 1 Samuel series. Okay, so here are the men that have influenced me and influenced this message today. And so as you hear me, you're going to be kind of hearing them as well. So we have Paul Laboutier, an obscure church in the Northwest. We have Skip Heitzig. He's Albuquerque, Calvary Church. On Wednesday night, he has a ministry called Expound Ministry. It's just working through the entire Bible. Alistair Begg, Scottish minister. He actually did a series on 1 Samuel. It's really pretty incredible. Keep going, guys. And then we have Dale Ralph Davis, who is a Reformed Theological Seminary professor. He wrote an incredible commentary on 1 Samuel. Matthew Henry, well, he's been dead for like 300 years, but ministers today in the 21st century are still looking to his commentaries in order to learn from him and have his words shape our words. And then there's Dr. Heath Thomas, PhD. He actually wrote a book called Christ-Centered Exposition. It's actually a commentary series, and it has an incredible resource on 1 Samuel. So when you hear my words, sometimes you're going to hear their words through me, or words that have their words have largely influenced what I'm about to say today. Right? Let's jump right into it. If you have a Bible, again, open it to 1 Samuel chapter 5. Now, you're kind of jumping into the middle of a movie. And if you just now are tuning in, recognize that, again, there's a lot of things that precede this moment that are really important to understanding this moment. First is we have a story of Hannah. She's experiencing barrenness or infertility, and she ends up getting a child. A miracle of God provides her a baby. That baby is a boy. That boy is Samuel. Samuel is going to be the new prophet for Israel, for this nation. In chapter 2, she sings a song in which we study about, or we kind of hear her affirmation or celebration of the goodness of God. In addition to that, we're introduced Eli, who's the prophet. He is a great leader in Israel during this time. He is the kind of the supreme leader at this moment. We also get introduced in chapter 3 to Hophni and Phinehas, Eli's sons. They are worthless, they are wicked. And then in chapter 4, everyone dies. It was a very uplifting Sunday. Last week, 34,000 Israelis die. In addition to that, Eli dies. In addition to that, Hophni and Phinehas, the sons of Eli, die. Oh, and there's a daughter-in-law of Eli. She dies too. I mean, it was very comforting. So now we have chapter 5. In chapter 5, the attention is now off of Hannah or Samuel and Eli and even Israel, and the attention is now focused in on God and how he is revealing himself, not just to the nation of Israel, but to the nations of the world. It's pretty incredible. So let's read this 5th chapter. It says, when the Philistines captured the ark of God. Now, that's going to be key because the majority of what we're about to read is about the fact that the Philistines now have in possession that sacred God box of Israel, right? And it says, when the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. And then the Philistines took the ark of God and they brought it into the house of Dagon. Dagon is the Philistine god or the big daddy god in Philistia. And they set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and they put him back in his place. And when they rose early the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. And it says in verse 6, the hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and his territory, though. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon our God. So they sent and they gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And they answered, well, let the ark of God of Israel be brought around to Gath. So they brought the ark of God of Israel there. But after they had brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against that city, causing a very great panic. And he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. But as soon as the people of Ekron and the people, they began to cry out, they have brought around to us the ark of God of Israel to kill us and our people. They sent, therefore, and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of God of Israel and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us or our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. This is God's word. All right, there's a couple of things. Again, so Israel loses in battle. There's great casualties, 34,000. Not only did they lose the battle, and 34,000 now Israeli men are dead, but they lost the ark. They lost that which is most sacred to the Israeli nation. They lost it to their great enemy, this persistent irritant to this nation of God, the Philistines. They ransack Shiloh, they take this ark from Ebenezer and they move it to Ashdod, and then they place it in the temple of Dagon. Now, so what's the big deal though about the ark? I took it for granted last week that, again, many in this room may not be aware or may not know what the ark is, or may not know, again, why the ark is so significant to Israel. Let me explain it. Again, if you missed out on felt board theology, here's your time to fill in the gaps. So the ark, again, is this God box in which God gives direction to certain people to create this box, a box that's 3 3/4 foot long by 2 1/4 foot wide by 2 1/4 foot high. It's a wooden box covered in gold. There are cherubim on top of the box. There is ringed mounts on the side of it so there could be poles to carry the box. Inside the box, Hebrews chapter 9, verse 4 tells us about its contents. It says this: the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which there was a golden urn, number one, holding the manna. There's Aaron's staff that budded, right? And the tablets of the covenant, or tablets of stone that were given to Moses. So the three primary things in this box. Now, it's a special box. It's a box that represented the manifest presence of God for his people. So the box would go to a place, they would construct a big tent around it, right? There'd be this inner sanctum to the tent, right? The Holy of Holies. And this certain tribe, these designated people would serve the people by going before the box at certain times of year. And they would then put blood on top of the box. It was a way in which they could make atonement for sin, right? Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. So they would take an animal blood and put it on the top on the mercy seat, right, to atone for the nation. It was also known as Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The box is a pretty big deal. And at the end of chapter 4, there's a child that is given birth, right? What's the child's name? You remember? Clearly, this mom hated their child because they named the child Ichabod, right? She's like, oh, you have a boy. Now we'll name him Ichabod, which means no glory, or that the glory has left. Because, again, that manifest presence, or that box of presence, it in fact disappeared from Israel. But you know what's interesting is, this isn't just the box of presence, it's also the box of promise. Because it's not just the ark, it's the ark of the covenant, which is the promise of God to humanity or to his people. And there are 5 covenants represented in the Old Testament, or really throughout the scriptures. Some might say that there are 8. But again, they are covenants. They are these promises that are much different than human promises. Humans, when we promise to one another, it's more of a contractual promise. We've talked about this before. We come as 2 people and we agree upon something, and here's the parameters of our agreement. I will do this, and therefore you will do that. Well, again, the contract exists that if the person fails to hold up their end of the deal, we get an out. But God doesn't provide a contract for humanity or for his people. He provides a covenant for his people, which is a promise that says, even if you don't hold up your end of the deal, I promise to be faithful to hold up mine. Well, this is a box that doesn't just represent the presence of God, but also the covenant promise of God. And so the people of God should be comforted in knowing that, again, that God has made a promise, and his promises have always held true, has always come to pass. We have never seen God slack off on what he said he was going to do. It's the box of promise. And although the box is out of our presence, the box is gone, God is going to do something in this 5th chapter to bring the box back. He's bringing the God box or the ark back. He's going to bring restoration to Israel. He's going to do a new thing through this nation. It's pretty incredible. So that's why the ark is a pretty big deal. That's why God is kind of in this moment trying to orchestrate a way in which he might bring redemption to his nation. Here's some things I noticed about this text. If you're a note taker, you might consider writing this down. The first thing I really noticed about these verses is that we get to see the unusual way in which God speaks. Right? The voice of God is sometimes comes to us in ways in which we did not see or plan for it to come. And we see that now God isn't just speaking to Israel, but God is in fact trying to communicate or speak to all nations, including this land of Philistia, or the people of the Philistines. And he speaks first and foremost by what? By toppling their big daddy, boss daddy, God, Dagon, in his temple, in his Holy of Holies. See, there's a message being communicated. This isn't just coincidental. What takes place is this. After they've just now destroyed Israel, 34,000 dead, there's great mourning and grief that has come upon this nation. The Philistines are walking pretty lightly. They got a nice bounce to their step because, right, they're victorious. They are the superpower of the region. And the day after they've just had victory in war, they now have brought the Ark of the Covenant into this temple of Dagon. It's not really a temple like we would know it. It's more like a pantheon. It is a place which kind of collects gods and spiritual artifacts and talismans and these kind of like religious good luck charms. Dagon is the supreme leader during this time, but he's not the only one. And what they do is they decide to take the ark and decide to place it beside Dagon. They put it probably side by side in a parallel fashion, saying, hey, we don't want to make the God of Israel upset. We don't want to make the person that inhabits this box irritated with us. So we'll worship him too. Really what they do is the Philistines have a religious zoo. And right, the ark is now the new exhibit in the zoo, much like when Memphis got the pandas, right? So they're telling the people, the Philistines, hey guys, come on, come to our religious zoo. We just collected a new exhibit. You're going to love it. It's going to mesmerize you. We got the ark. We got the God of Israel. Although they got the God box, they did not get God though. And it's pretty apparent in this text, right? They got the artifact, but they did not get the person. They are not able to contain or control God. But he begins to communicate to the Philistines because he topples the statue. He topples Dagon. So imagine this big kind of like church-like structure, temple-like structure. And there's this God. Who's in the God? It doesn't operate like the God that we know and serve and follow. A God that's omnipresent always and everywhere. A God that is immaterial. But their God is very material. It's very local. It is this statue. It is this carving. It is this artifact right here. This is it. This is the God. And yet what happens is when all the people show up to see the new exhibit known as the Ark of the Covenant, right, they find Dagon face forward on the ground at the base of the ark. God's trying to speak. He's trying to make sure a message is known, that the Philistines be aware of something. They're trying to show that, again, Yahweh is not a one of many kind of gods. He is not a parallel with Dagon. He is not just another deity to kind of use as a good luck type of charm, that he is supreme, that he is over. He rules and reigns. And your big daddy, boss daddy God, Dagon, he is now bowed down to me. Right? It is not coincidental that the posture that the statue is taken is that it is not just on the ground, but it is face down on the ground, showing honor, showing reverence, showing supremacy. It is communicating. God is communicating. I am supreme. I am over. I am beyond what you have right here. What a surprise. These Philistines that come in to explore and see these new things have to be so shocked with the fact that, again, their supreme ruler is, in fact, it's low. It's on the ground. It needs to be helped up. This, I would consider, is the whispers of God. This is God whispering in the story, trying to communicate to the Philistines. But it doesn't seem that the Philistines get it. So they pick their God back up and they put him back in place, right? And they go on with their life. But then the very next day, the story tells us that they come back to that same temple of Dagon and they see something a little bit different. This time, Dagon is falling down on the ground, but he hasn't just fallen on the ground. He's lost his hands and he's lost his head. I believe that this is probably similar to that Dumb and Dumber moment with Lloyd Christmas. You know, we have no job, we have no food, our pets' heads are falling off. Did you guys watch that movie? I read this text and I was like, oh my goodness, this is Dumb and Dumber, right? You know. Anyway, my inner student pastor is showing. But no, they have this moment. They come in, they go, you're on the ground yesterday, and now I come in and your hands and your head are gone, right? It's this moment, like everyone's panicked. Everyone's like, what is happening? Our world is falling apart. Our religious center is crumbling. But it seems to be that there's a not so secret message of God that's being delivered to the Philistines. See, because it's not just like coincidental that he's lost his head. It's not just coincidental that he's lost his hands. This is actually a tactic of war, right? Right? The loss of head means that an enemy has been defeated. That's why, like, when David comes against the Philistines, he comes against Goliath, what does he do? That boy doesn't just throw a rock at the freaking nature Goliath and he falls down on the ground. No, the boy knocks him down, he falls to the ground, and then what does he do? He goes and gets the sword and lops off his head. And it's at that point that the Philistines begin to scatter. Why? I've won. Victory is ours. You lost. And they begin to scatter. So the loss of the head, right, is an indication that, again, someone else has declared victory over you. You've lost your head. You are no good. You are worthless. We rule over you. It's a tactic of war. The Philistines, you would think, would have realized, man, this is a big deal. Lost his head, lost his hands. God is saying something. The Philistines, The Philistines may not have been the smartest people that ever existed, right? And I know I beat it up on Eli the previous 2 weeks, but now let's beat up on the Philistines just a tad too. Because you think that, again, these superstitious people would in fact recognize that, again, the things that are happening within their temple of Dagon are in fact meaningful. Because that's what superstitious type of religion or rabbit foot theology really does, is you're looking for meaning in the most trivial places. You're trying to find if there's any kind of like secret meaning or hidden agenda, right? The light goes out. All of a sudden, it's like everyone's going to make a meaning happen because the light went out. Really, it's just the bulb went out, but all of a sudden people are going to think, oh, you know what? I think that God is trying to communicate that, again, that there's some people in this room walking in darkness. Well, I don't necessarily know that. I think the light went out, right? But those that have rabbit foot theology or superstitious way of their spirituality begin to make everything mean something. Those things that are trivial become significant things. Here, the Philistines are superstitious people, clearly. They have a rabbit foot type of theology, a superstitious religion. They're about lucky charms type of faith. But what happens is they are stepping over that which is obvious to kind of create that which is obscure. Right? There's a message being communicated. Dagon's down. You would think superstitious people are like, this means something, guys. We lost it. He's down on the ground. I mean, I know we beat Israel, but maybe that God is not so happy with the fact that we beat his nation. Maybe he's not so happy with the fact that we now have the ark in our temple. Maybe he's not so happy that we put him on parallel with Dagon, but they skip right over it. They skip over the obvious to grab onto the obscure, right? And then it's also really interesting is, don't you think that if you're the person that's responsible for picking up the statue Dagon and putting it back into place, that you're probably going to struggle to be confident in your belief in that God, right? Any God that you have to help up, because it says that they put him in his place, is a God that's too small, it's a God that's not worth much, right? This is the God that they are attributing their victory against Israel to. Oh, we killed 34,000 men. We're winning. We're conquerors. We are the great superpower of this region. Let's go help up the guy that got us to this point. Okay, yep. You stay right there, Dagon. Yep, you're good. It's ridiculous. You helping up your God. If you're helping up your God, right? If your God needs some kind of physical intervention in order to bring a rescue attempt, no, your God is not a God at all. And also this, hands and heads. What? It's fascinating. What does the text say? After they lose the head and the hands, how do they explain it away? Do you see it? They say that the threshold is cursed. All right, so you walk in day 2. Dagon's lost his head, lost his hands. You would begin to think, you would say, you know what? We probably need to explore this a little bit. I mean, we love to convene and pull together the council and the lords of the Philistines and get together and kind of figure out what to do and what's our solution. But the answer that they arrive at, or the explanation that they give to themselves, is that step is a cursed step. They go, you guys, that's why it says that no one would actually step on the threshold to this day. That they would come to this place and go, you know, guys, right there is where Dagon lost his head and hands. Don't step on it. You'll lose your head and hands as well. Do we hear the stupidity? Do we hear the craziness? What are you doing? The superstitious religion, again, is triumphing once more. You're missing the obvious in order to grab a hold of the obscure. The Philistines aren't the smartest of people. God now, though, as he's communicating, he's toppled the statue. Now the statue's lost head and hands. The voice of God has been raised, and the level of directness and communication is pretty extreme. It's pretty clear right now what God is communicating. But not only do we see in this text the unusual way in which God speaks to the world, but also we see the unusual mercy of God. Now, it's unusual from our perspective, not unusual from his perspective. Mercy is often seen or understood in a dramatic fashion. Probably if we were to all kind of, put our brains together and kind of put together what a picture of mercy looked like, we would probably develop a word picture of this authoritative judge, king, ruler, and there's this person that's an offender, enemy, criminal, and this authority is now speaking through a mediator and discussing about what kind of punishment or wrath this person, the offender, is going to experience. And so this moment, the mediator is like, what shall we do? And we usually picture, again, this thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up, he's all good, he gets to live. That king has then shown mercy to this criminal. Or thumbs down, he's executed, no mercy received by him. But the mercies of God actually have different flavors, and they have different looks, and it doesn't always have a dramatic fashion about it. Again, if you think about it, you received new mercies this morning when you woke up. And you probably didn't even know that you needed it, and probably didn't even know that you received it, right? So it's not always this dramatic, death or no death type thing. Sometimes it's the way in which God is showing kindness and showing favor and or displaying his faithfulness to you. So we see the unusual mercy of God in this text. We see it in a couple ways. First mercy move of God is that he topples the statue. It's a mercy move. Now, they've just destroyed Israel, and they've offended a holy God, and they've stolen that which is most sacred to Israel. And God is almighty, and he's all powerful, and he could have just smited them. He's done it before. He has a history of just crushing sometimes those that come against him. The Philistines are ones that are worthy of being crushed, but yet they are not crushed. What does he do? I'm trying to get your attention. That which is most sacred to you, I'm pushing them down on the ground. See the message here? Would you not receive? He's bowing to the ark. The second mercy move of God is what? A destroyed statue. Not a toppled statue, a destroyed statue. So it's at this moment they have to put Humpty Dumpty Dagon back together again. He's lost hands and feet. Someone go get the Elmer's glue, right? We got to put this guy back together. And more than likely, they weren't able to put him back together. More than likely, someone's going to have to go and create a new Dagon. Therefore, they're having to create a God in their image. God that's not worth much, right? Any God that you're fashioning into your image is not a God that's worth giving your entire life to. But here they are now having to create a new piece of wood or chisel a new piece of stone to create a representation of Dagon, to create a new Dagon for the Philistines. He's destroying that which is special, that which is again. Now, side note, Ichabod meant in the chapter 4, it meant no glory or the glory had left. But there is no human being that is able to diminish or decrease the glory of God. They're speaking largely about the presence or their personal experience right now. But notice, as Israel probably are mourning in this moment, thinking about the glory that is left, the Philistines are beginning to see the glory revealed. They are beginning to see who Yahweh truly is. It's in this moment they begin to recognize what kind of God Israel really truly served. What kind of God is this? The God of the scriptures, the God of this nation. Here's the third mercy move. A plague. His mercy is now taking another form. Now, there's so many people in this room that probably avoid the Old Testament because we begin to believe that the Old Testament has a different kind of God in it than the God of the New Testament. When we start to hold up God of the OT and the 39 books of the Old Testament against Jesus of the New Testament, we begin to think, well, they're two different people. I mean, it's like a two-faced type of reality if it's the same person. And we begin to think, no, listen, Jesus is very free in his giving of mercy and grace in the New Testament. It's very clear. His mercy and grace are very obvious. But if you're one of those persons that think that the God of the Old Testament is in fact a merciless God, you're not looking at this story enough. You're not inspecting these scriptures enough. Because you not see the mercy of God? God went after the inanimate before he went after the animate. He went after that which is stone and wood before he went after flesh. Right? He's just continuing to decrease it. He's continuing to amp up his voice. He's continuing to do different things to kind of break through to his people, break through to this nation that they might know that he is God. So if you ever begin to think like, man, he's so cruel, he's so unkind, he gives them a plague. Yes, he gave them a plague. It's a type of mercy because he wants them to know him. He knows that there's abundant life that comes in knowing the sovereign. it says his mercy takes a different form. Now, the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, in fact, in this chapter has another word that's not in our English Bible, and it's the word mice. So when it's describing the plague, it's in fact makes mention of mice. In the 6th chapter, we'll actually learn that there's mice that are talked about. So more than likely, this plague is not just like a random plague, but it's actually the bubonic plague. A plague that was spread again through mice and spread through fleas. It's also known as the Black Death that existed in the 13th century. And it's this, it's a thing that killed 20% of the European population, right? Black Death was pretty terrible. Again, boils that would grow and ooze, and then eventually they'd be infected and the person would die. Actually, we learned a lot about quarantine, but we actually did not learn during this 2020 pandemic that the word quarantine actually derives itself from the Black Plague or the Black Death, when they would actually put soldiers or put sailors on ships for 40 days to see if they were in fact infected. That's what quarantine means. Anyway, that's bonus information in case you ever make it on Jeopardy. All right. So we see mercy, number 1, toppled statue. Mercy of God, number 2, destroyed statue. Mercy, number 3, we see the plague. This is the mercy of misery. This is a hard mercy to understand. It's a type of mercy that we really don't want, but in fact, it very much is, again, the way in which God expresses his mercy towards humanity. Sometimes, not always, that the misery that we experience in this world is the way in which God can get our attention. That the misery that we go through is in fact a way that he might strip away those things that are trivial to show you that which is meaningful. So when we're experiencing mercy and we've lost joy and we've lost abundance and we've lost excitement or we've lost energy, it's for the reason of expressing or recognizing and seeing a greater joy and a greater excitement and a greater abundance. That again, that in our misery, that which is stolen in an earthly or in a human or physical sense, we often reveal that which is eternal, that is immaterial, that is given directly by God. Misery is sometimes God's mercy. Again, there was a few weeks ago where you guys came to church and then I wasn't here to preach the Bible because I had uninterruptible hiccups. It was the most embarrassing illness ever. But it was one of the most miserable illnesses I've ever experienced in my entire life. When the doctors gave me a prescription, he was at the 9 o'clock service. He came to my rescue in a big way. But so I had hiccups for like 72 hours. And so you imagine like hiccuping like 20 times a minute, right? And then you can't go to sleep, right? Just think about it. Hiccuping. So it was miserable. It's kind of laughable now because people are like, really? Are you a baby? But I was crying in my house. So Saturday at like 5 o'clock, I'm like, I'm going to the hospital. I'm hiccuping. People are coming over like, are you going to die? I was like, I think I'm going to die. And I'm taking every pill under the sun just trying to figure out how to find some relief. But you know what's amazing? In the midst of your misery, you gain great clarity as to what is meaningful. Misery provides enhanced vision about what matters most. It is a type of mercy. It's in that moment, like I'm promising everything to God. God, I will never take for granted, like sleep ever again. I'm never going to take for granted sleep, In my hiccups, I'm like, I'm never going to take for granted what it's like to speak a full sentence without, being interrupted. I'm making multiple promises to God because I'm seeing those things that matter most, those things that really are things of significance. Misery does this to us. And it is a way that God is demonstrating his mercy to us to find a breakthrough, to get our attention, to wake us up, to pull us from our slumber. My pastor growing up used to say that the most miserable person on the planet is not someone that doesn't know Jesus, but someone that is out of relationship with Jesus, out of fellowship with Christ. It's a Christian that actually knows Christ, but they've just wandered away from him because of their sin and their selfishness. He said, that is the most miserable person. And at the time of hearing this, I disagreed with him. I'm like, nope, that's not true at all. But the more I'm a Christian, the more I'm a pastor, the more I recognize this is so true. The most miserable person is a person that's been separated from God, the person that has had a taste of God. They've seen God, and then they've walked away from him. They are miserable. That misery is, in fact, his mercy. That misery is, in fact, the way in which he's trying to get you back. You don't have to stay in your misery. You just have to return home. You come back to the cross. You come back to Christ. You come back to a God that loves. Mercy move number 4 of God is this. It's the death of some. You're like, that's not mercy. Yes, it is. It's the death of some, not the death of all. It says what happens is, it seems to be that the text shows us that the illness is increasing in its effect. The symptoms get a little more severe and a little more, the symptoms seem to grow. Because it starts by people just getting sick. And then what do? They get sick and then they say, hey, let's take that ark somewhere else, right? I'm sick and tired of being sick. And they move it to another city. And then they move it to another city. And they just keep kind of playing hot potato with the ark of the covenant, believing that they're going to find some relief from their symptoms. Again, to the point where they don't actually get the clear communications of God. They don't receive the message that they are offending a holy and righteous God. And what happens? God says, all right, if that's not getting your attention, some of you are going to die. And I'm trying to find breakthrough so you recognize that there is a spiritual or an eternal death that's on the other side of physical death that is so much worse. And some of you will die in order that there might be a waking up to this people, to this nation, that they might know that Yahweh is supreme. It's a mercy move. So why does this matter? Why does any of what I've just said so far this morning matter? You may be in this room and you may be thinking, well, look, I've been intellectually stimulated by your words, or I'm historically and biblically informed about 1 Samuel. But what does this matter to my life 2021? Actually, this matters greatly to your life in 2021. Let me walk through why I think this text speaks significantly to the people that are sitting in this room right now. Ready? First is this. Because we're pagan people, we have actually more in common with the Philistines than we do with the Israelites. Some might believe that in America in 2021 that we're becoming a godless nation. I actually don't believe we're becoming a godless nation. We're just becoming a pagan one. We've just exchanged Yahweh God or a supreme God for just a multitude of gods. We become polytheistic. Now, the gods in which we celebrate or we worship don't maybe look like gods, but they're in fact gods. They may not be carved stone totem poles or these things that are made out of stone, but again, they are very much gods because they're objects or recipients of worship. If worship is our mind's attention and our heart's affections, right, then we are people that love to worship, and we worship a lot of things. We have just traded one God for many gods. We are more polytheistic than monotheistic. We have traded Yahweh for other things. We traded Yahweh for the God of career. You've traded Yahweh for the God of family. You've traded Yahweh for the God of technology. You've traded Yahweh for the God of comfort. We've traded God for, or Yahweh for the God of sports. We've traded Yahweh for so many different things. Our hearts are divided as a people. We have more in common with the Philistines and the temple of Dagon than we do the church of Jesus Christ, if we're honest. It matters. But here's the thing why it really matters. It's because just like Dagon is not enough. And that which you worship is not enough. And it will disappoint you. Play the tape forward. Hit fast forward. Worship it long enough. It will disappoint you. Your career will disappoint you. Your kids, well, eventually they'll leave the house and you're by yourself and you'll be disappointed. If it's money, it'll be stripped away from you in a moment. These things are fleeting and failing and trivial. They don't last. And so understand that you are trading God for that which is never going to promise or never going to deliver on the promises that God makes to us. Here's the second reason why this text matters, because it shapes our serving. I would call this the slippery slope of serving. See, this is how serving typically works with the church. By the way, if you're not serving, you're probably souring. That's just how it goes. Again, we can't be people that are receiving and never pouring out. We end up in a really stale, really dangerous place. Our spiritual lives really are stunted. So serving is the way in which we keep our soul fresh. But this is how it works. Normally, service opportunities are presented before people. And we petition, hey, would you consider serving? And we'll say, hey, come serve with kids and serve with students, serve on the mission field. We got to go to Zambia. We got to go to Jonestown. Come on, join us. And we feel like, you may even feel like someone twists your arm and eventually jump into serving. And if you serve long enough, faithfully enough, eventually you begin to believe that, again, the reason that you're serving or the importance of your serving is that God really needs you. It's a slippery slope of serving. Again, you didn't sense your need at first, but as you've been serving for a long period of time, you begin to think that you're an essential aspect to the church, which is true in one regard, but is not true in another. And according to this text, what God is communicating is that he doesn't need anyone. This text makes it pretty clear. No Israelite is bringing the ark back. No, God is bringing the ark back. And although Israel is lost, God is showing, no, that I don't need my children. I can still win. And sometimes in our service to ourselves, our service to the church, service to the mission, we begin to think, well, man, listen, God really needs me to show up and involved. Now, don't quit our kids' ministry or our student ministry because you're like, well, my motivations aren't correct. Just get them corrected and then continue to serve. But here's the thing. You get to serve. We get to do this. Actually, if you walk through that door right there, there's next step room. You walk on the way out on the wall. I put it, it's so very important to me. I put this picture. It says, we get to do this. We get to serve the God Most High. We get to be involved in his mission. It's important that you know it and remember it and hold on to it. Do not miss it. So this shapes our serving. God really doesn't need us. He's going to build his church. His mission is going to advance. The kingdom is going to grow. His glory will be known. And we get to participate with it, but even if we don't, it's still gonna happen. Here's the third thing, because this comforts us. And you're like, what? There's nothing comforting about this text. This is something very comforting in this text. You missed it. You said, this is just kind of another discouraging text, right? Dagon being toppled. We're just looking at Philistines. They get tumors, bubonic plague, a bunch of people die. What's encouraging about 1 Samuel chapter 5? Thanks for asking. Let me explain why 1 Samuel is so bad. Paul Laboutier, the guy I showed earlier today, he said that actually in Psalms 139, David says, where can I flee from your spirit? Where can I go from your presence? It's an incredible story. And what David is doing is he's not just communicating about the character of God. He's also dismantling erroneous thinking about how God's work. See, because the Philistines are moving the ark, one city to another city to another city, believing that God is localized to that city. He's geographically bound. And when David starts saying, where can I go from your presence? It's a rhetorical question. There's nowhere I can go to escape from God. Then I go here, he's gonna be there. If I go there, he's gonna be there. I take a step back, he's gonna be there with me as well. This is great comfort for all of us. This is what we all need to know, that God is forever with us if we belong to him. He is omnipresent. We can't escape him. He doesn't escape us. So here's why it matters. It's because some of us are suffering right now, and in the pain of suffering, we often feel like we're by ourselves. And although you may feel like you're by yourself, you are actually not by yourself. Where can you go from his presence? Nowhere. He is with you in your suffering. To the mom that's up late at night with the crying baby, and it feels like the whole world is sleeping right now, and you are all by yourself right now, you get to know that the one that watches over Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. He has not closed his eyes, and his presence is to be experienced in the darkness of night when you feel all by yourself. You're not. He is with you. And to the dad that's on the road for another business trip who's feeling the temptation to compromise sexually or have some fuzzy math with the business, right? You have to understand the presence of God is with you even in the darkness of your isolation, in that new city and that new interruption, the loss of normality. He is still with you in that hotel room or at that lonely dinner. You have an advocate that is closer to you. You just need to turn your eyes towards him. And to the college student that's getting ready to go to Ole Miss or Mississippi State or the university, guess what? There's gonna be a moment where you experience the great weight of loss of community, that you're gonna walk on a campus that is kind of saturated with secularism, and you're gonna feel the heaviness of the darkness, like you're having to stand all by yourself, and you're all alone in this. I'm the only one that shares my conviction, and you're having to turn down the request of your friend for a Thursday night adventure or a Friday night party or Saturday frat gathering. You're gonna have to say, no, I can't do it. It's too much, too hard, too difficult. And you will feel alone by yourself, and you're the only one that loves Jesus. Understand, you are not alone. You do not escape his presence. His presence is close and it is near. You must recognize it. This is a comfort to us. This is also the energy for the Great Commission. It's an energy for our evangelism. Do you know that? Because this says that not only is God concerned that that the nation of Israel would know him, but that all nations would know him. He wants the Philistines to know. And when you think that, again, you're God's great plan A. No, he's God's his own great plan A. That he very much desires that all would know him. And here's the last point. I'll close at this. Because this very well may be the explanation of the heaviness of your life. In this text, 3 different times it says the hand of God was heavy. Some of you are looking for an explanation of why you're experiencing what you're experiencing right now. Some of you are experiencing great weight and great pain and great suffering and great misery, and you are wondering, why am I going through this? Maybe it's circumstantial because you live in a fallen world. Right? This world is sin-scarred. It is not ideal. It's not the way it should be. Maybe it's because it's consequential. Maybe you did something and this is just the result of your personal decision. Or maybe this is a good God trying to wake you up. He is being heavy-handed with you so you would respond. It is his mercy. And today, if you're one of those, if you're feeling the heavy-handedness of God, do not push it away. Do not ignore it. Do not try to shut up the conviction of the Spirit in your life. Respond. Maybe you're not a Christian and you're feeling the heavy-handedness of conviction right now. Surrender yourself to him. Confess to him, God, forgive me of my sins. Give me yourself. I want to follow you all my days. Experience new life because of it. This very well may be the explanation of why you're going through what you're going through today. Maybe, just maybe. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all things. We thank you for 1 Samuel 5. God, I ask that you would help us to cling to your word, search your word, expose your word. God, I pray that you would meet us in that pursuit too. We need your Spirit to illuminate these words. God, I pray that, again, you would comfort us to know that, again, we can't flee from your presence. We can't get out of your sight, that you're a God that is always near. And God, we thank you that you're a God that's greater than all the other gods, right? That you're a God that's superior to Dagon. You're a God that's superior to our careers. You're superior to our athletics or to our cravings of technology, to our desires for comfort and wealth. You're superior to all things. And God, forgive us for giving over to these smaller, lesser gods that do not deliver on their promises. God, help us to learn to run to you, to cling to you, recognize that you're faithful and you do deliver on your promises. You are a God of covenants. And even though we've let go of you so very often, you never let go of us. God, we love you. Help us now to worship you because of this great truth. These things we pray in your name. Amen.